Today the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed just above the 11,000 mark. I'm gonna start using the YouTube and video to try and apprise people of what's going on in this ill-fated world. The story behind my perspective is exhaustively covered in my blog, which is at spiritoftruthblog.com or spiritoftruth.me. In general, what I've been trying to warn the world about is that, in essence, man as a species is currently insane. For all intents and purposes, mankind has lost touch with reality, lost touch with the truth, and I believe that it is my mission to try and save humanity from itself, if you will, by revealing the truth. The truth, in essence, being that there is a creator. We are creatures living in the context of God's creation, and in the context of God's creation, we are accountable to our creator, and therefore must live our lives according to his will, according to the edicts of God as spelled out in religion, particularly in terms of mainly the core principle of the golden rule, i.e. love thy neighbor as thyself and love thy God. Now, with regard to the fate of civilization in the near term, to understand my perspective, we're going to have to really explore my blog, but just in the current situation, keep in mind the Dow's closed just above 11,000, and in the context of the Elliott wave principle, which is a cornerstone of my perspective, history unfolds according to an underlying deterministic wave pattern. That wave pattern is based upon fractals, such that history unfolds in the context of cycles within cycles within cycles, some very short term, some very long term. Now, the Elliott wave principle, which was popularized by Robert Prechter during the 1980s and 1990s, is focused on movements in stock prices, but really what the stock market is just acting as a barometer with regard to the underlying wave-like course of human history. And in the context of the wave principle, where we are at the current historical juncture is we're in the midst of the grand supercycle peak. Is a cycle that began basically with the birth of America in the late 18th century, and has that the distinct five-wave Elliott wave pattern is has been peaking really since 2000, when the Dow Jones Industrial Average climbed above the 10,000 mark. The first major reversal occurred with the dot-com bubble burst, and then the system was reflated by governing authorities, the Federal Reserve and Treasury, and that led to the second major mania in real estate, which busted in 2008, 2009, and is currently underway with the Great Recession. And then starting in spring of 2009, another reflation has occurred, and that coincided with the election of Barack Obama, whose book, The Audacity of Hope, would have better been entitled The Audacity of False Hope, because in fact the reflation that's been underway has been an absolute farce with regard to historical reality. Now, the nature of these cycles that unfold on Wall Street are basically, they fit in the context of what I describe as manic-depressive man. That in fact our species, and particularly American society, appears to, the historical pattern of behavior is one of manic-depressive insanity. You can see that on Wall Street with regard to bull and bear markets, where you have swings of speculative optimism and mania, followed by panics, crashes, and swings to pessimistic lows in the context of bear markets. In the actual economy and society overall, you can see these manic-depressive mood swings, mass mood swings, unfold in terms of boom-bust patterns. The last super cycle, not grand super cycle, the last super cycle of that was distinguished this pattern occurred with the Roaring Twenties, with the peak, the manic peak in 1929, the Great Crash in October of 1929, and then the Great Depression. So you have a social mania like the Roaring Twenties, then you get panics and crashes seasonally. Typically it occurs, the panics tend to strike during the autumn period, and then major periods of prolonged depression and stagnation in economic activity, where the booms are characterized by radical innovation and technological development, and then the depressions are characterized by a paucity of creative activity and thought, and basically social distress and unhappiness. Again, see my blog, but also see my thesis, which I completed for my master's degree last year, actually December of 2009, my degree was conferred. But the point is that my thesis is called Manic-Depressive Man, and what we're watching in terms of human history are these unfolding patterns, wave patterns, that are can be characterized as manic-depressive in quality. Now, the interesting part of manic depression is that in individuals, it can be associated with creative genius, mad genius syndrome. For instance, many of the great creative geniuses of history, like Ludwig van Beethoven, Isaac Newton, Charles Dickens, Hemingway, Edgar Allan Poe, a lot of great political leaders like Winston Churchill, religious leaders like Martin Luther, all suffered from this form of mental and emotional instability. You could call it a disorder, but in fact it seems to be a source of creative genius. So who's to say what is sane and insane? What we can say is that the manic-depressive emotional instability often goes hand in hand with maximum creativity in individuals. Well, apparently this also holds true with society, in that the United States, given its manic-depressive character, is probably been the most creative force known in human history. And in essence, the whole world is now caught up, and man as a species, I would say, suffers from this what I call global bipolar disorder. And in the context of these swings between mass optimism and mass pessimism, human history is interwoven. Now, a good way to get a sense of that